The lower belly pooch is in a category of its own when it comes to stubborn body fat, and the women dealing with it know exactly what that means. You can lose weight everywhere else. Your face gets slimmer, your arms respond, your waist narrows slightly, and that specific area right below your belly button sits there completely untouched, like it did not receive the same memo as the rest of your body. It is not the same as general belly fat, and it does not respond to the same things, which is why the standard advice of eat less and move more produces results everywhere, except the one place you're actually trying to change. Understanding why it is there in the first place is the only way to understand how to actually get rid of it, because the lower belly pooch has multiple causes that look identical from the outside but require completely different approaches. Treating them all the same way is why most women spend months doing the wrong things with complete dedication and seeing nothing change in that specific area. The first and most common cause is something most fitness content never mentions because it is not exciting enough to build a program around anterior pelvic tilt. This is a postural issue where the front of your pelvis tilts downward and the back tilts upward, creating an exaggerated arch in your lower back and pushing your lower abdomen forward. The lower belly is not actually containing more fat than it should in this case. It is being pushed forward by the position of your pelvis, which creates the appearance of a pooch that no amount of fat loss will eliminate because the issue is structural rather than compositional. Women with anterior pelvic tilt can be genuinely lean and still have a visible lower belly protrusion, and they spend years trying to diet and exercise it away without success because they are trying to solve a postural problem with a fat loss approach. The fix for anterior pelvic tilt involves strengthening the muscles that pull the pelvis back into neutral, specifically the glutes and the deep abdominal muscles, while stretching the muscles that are pulling it forward, specifically the hip flexors and lower back. Women who correct their anterior pelvic tilt frequently report that their lower belly pooch visibly reduces within weeks without any change in their body weight or fat percentage because the fat was never the problem. Bloating is the second cause that gets consistently confused with fat and that responds to completely different interventions. Chronic bloating in the lower abdomen is driven by digestive issues, food sensitivities, gut bacteria imbalances, and eating patterns that produce excess gas accumulation in the intestines. It can make the lower belly look significantly larger than it actually is in terms of fat tissue, and it fluctuates throughout the day in a way that actual fat does not, which is why many women notice their lower belly looks flat in the morning and noticeably distended by evening. If your lower belly situation is significantly worse by the end of the day than it is when you first wake up, you're dealing with bloating rather than or in addition to fat, and the dietary approaches that reduce fat do almost nothing for chronic bloating because they are addressing a completely different mechanism. Common bloating triggers include eating too quickly and swallowing excess air, consuming high amounts of certain fermentable carbohydrates that feed gas, producing bacteria in the large intestine, dairy sensitivity that produces incomplete digestion and gas, artificial sweeteners that disrupt gut bacteria balance, carbonated drinks that introduce gas directly, and eating large meals that overwhelm digestive capacity and slow the movement of food through the intestines. Identifying and addressing your specific triggers over 30 days produces visible lower belly changes that months of dieting never achieved because you were finally addressing the actual cause rather than an assumed one. Visceral fat is the deeper layer of fat stored inside the abdominal cavity around your organs, and it behaves differently from the subcutaneous fat that sits just under your skin. Visceral fat accumulation is driven heavily by cortisol, insulin resistance, poor sleep, and chronic stress, which is why women who are not significantly overweight overall can still carry meaningful visceral fat in the lower abdominal area if their lifestyle is creating the hormonal conditions that promote it. Visceral fat is not something you can feel or pinch because it sits behind the abdominal muscle wall, but it contributes to the rounded, full appearance of the lower belly, and it responds well to the right approach once you understand what is actually driving it. Cortisol is the primary hormonal driver of visceral fat accumulation, and it is almost never addressed directly in the content targeting lower belly fat. When your cortisol is chronically elevated, your body stores fat preferentially in the abdominal area, and the lower belly is one of the primary storage sites. Every stressor in your life contributes to this. Poor sleep is one of the biggest cortisol elevators available and one of the most consistently underestimated contributors to lower belly fat specifically. Women who are eating carefully and training consistently, but sleeping poorly are fighting a cortisol-driven fat storage signal that overrides the caloric deficit they think they are in and directs available fat to the lower abdomen regardless of their dietary discipline. Estrogen plays a specific role in lower belly fat distribution that becomes more pronounced as women move through their late 20s and 30s. Estrogen influences where fat is stored, and as it declines, it shifts fat distribution from the hips and thighs toward the central and lower abdominal area. This is why women who maintained a relatively flat lower belly through their 20s without much effort start noticing a persistent pooch developing in their 30s despite no obvious change in their habits. The habits did not change, the hormonal environment directing fat storage did. And the approaches that worked in their 20s, or would have worked, become less effective without accounting for the hormonal shift that is now driving the distribution pattern. The subcutaneous fat layer in the lower belly is genuinely the most stubborn fat on the female body, and it is the last to respond to fat loss efforts. Your body follows a genetically determined order for fat release, and the lower abdomen sits near the very end of that order for most women. This means a woman can make significant visible progress in fat loss across her entire body and still have her lower belly look largely unchanged, because her body has not yet worked through enough of the fat loss sequence to reach that area. Most women interpret this as the lower belly being uniquely resistant and conclude that something different needs to happen there specifically. Nothing different needs to happen. The same approach needs to continue for long enough that the body works through its priority order and begins releasing fat from the area it was protecting last. The lower belly responds. It just responds last, and the timeline required is longer than almost any program sold under the promise of targeting it is willing to admit. Deep core muscles are the final piece that most lower belly content ignores entirely. The transverse abdominis is the deepest layer of abdominal muscle, and it functions like a corset, wrapping around your midsection and pulling the lower abdomen inward when it is properly engaged and developed. Most women have a significantly underdeveloped transverse abdominis because it is not trained by standard ab exercises and is not engaged during most conventional workouts. When this muscle is weak, the lower abdomen protrudes forward even in the absence of significant fat because there is no muscular structure holding it in. Developing the transverse abdominis through specific deep core engagement exercises produces a visible reduction in lower belly protrusion that is structural rather than compositional, meaning it does not require fat loss to happen, and it can produce visible results relatively quickly compared to the months required for meaningful fat loss in that area. The lower belly pooch is almost never just one problem. For most women, it is a combination of anterior pelvic tilt, pushing the abdomen forward, chronic bloating making it look larger by evening, visceral fat driven by cortisol and poor sleep, subcutaneous fat that sits at the end of the body's fat release priority order, and an underdeveloped deep core that provides no structural support to hold the area flat. Addressing any one of these in isolation produces partial results at best. Addressing all of them simultaneously is what produces the visible change that years of targeted dieting and ab workouts never delivered. Your lower belly is not uniquely broken, and it is not immune to change. It is responding to a combination of inputs that most of the advice you have been following was never designed to address. Change those inputs, and the area that has felt like the most immovable part of your body starts becoming one of the most responsive ones.